will hurt you. Between insects and plants and snakes and so forth. But I think it'll be very informative. So we do have a pretty aggressive agenda. But let's first go ahead and stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Brian's going to come up and have some announcements, and a couple of the people are going to speak.
Hello, everybody. Anybody here for the first time? Anybody here for the first time? Welcome. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you guys. And so we're just going to kind of move along there. Talking about announcements, we'll just go straight to the training that's coming up, our calendar, so to speak. Of course, tonight we've got the head, neck, and back injuries, which Roberta is going to be giving a bit of a presentation on. And then that's going to be followed by Pat Summers, one of our block captains, who is totally into plants and such, and she's going to talk about issues with poisonous plants. And there'll be some discussion about how to treat if you get tangled up with a bad plant or an animal or critter that does you bad. So they'll be coming up in just a couple moments. Moving on, and that's going to be December 6th is our second annual neighbor-to-neighbor potluck. You know, kind of celebrate the end of the hurricane season, even though we've got 2, maybe 3 floating around right now. Hopefully they all just keep away from us. But we have some information. Milton, I understand you've got something about the potluck. Did you want to come up and speak? Oh, okay. Everybody, Christine Conley, give her a round of applause.
Just really short and sweet. As Brian mentioned, our potluck is on December 6th. It is at 6:30, but the doors will be opening at 6 o'clock. The sign-up sheet will be in the hallway after today's meeting. If you happen to want to sign up before the meeting's over or at the end of the meeting, I have it with me. Come on over and you can sign up for what you'd like to bring then. Otherwise, see the hallway.
Okay.
Thank you.
This year's potluck, we're going to cap it with a maximum of 90 people, I believe, is what we're going to be shooting for. So, first come, first serve on that sign-up list. Don't be bashful. We want to have a good time with you guys as well. And we've got, looks like we've been starting to invite some folks that you may recognize their names, if not their face, if you've attended any of their presentations. Chief Joseph Mira, who's with the Leesburg Fire Department. He's the head honcho there for them. He has confirmed that him and his wife will be coming. We're going to be reaching out to possibly Lake County Emergency Operations Management, Nick there. If anyone went on the tour with us to the EOC, he was the first gentleman that spoke at our tour. And so we're going to reach out to him as well. Moving on, the upcoming, and this is going to be on December 10th, which is not our regular meeting day. Oh, hey, Gary. Glad to see you. It will be Bill Hilchey. Some of you guys may recognize that name. You might recognize the face. He has done our training not only for Neighbor to Neighbor, but our community in the past. And he is coming back on the 10th. It's going to be first thing in the morning, 8 a.m. on a Saturday for CPR and AED training. He'll bring his dummies with him. And so we'll get to practice possibly one of the true life-saving measures that you never know when it could present to you that somebody might need CPR to save their lives. So it's going to be a very interesting class. I've attended his CPR class. He's got a great sense of humor, good stories, and it's real relevant. He was a firefighter and an EMS in New York State with a lot of years under his belt, so he knows what he talks about. Finally, next year, hard to believe 2022 is about ready to wrap up and we're rolling into 23. Larry's been working on setting up the dermatology folks, the on-spot dermatology. They had their lab or whatever you want to call it that was out here in the parking lot, and they saw people. They're coming in to do a talk about dermatology. You know, many of us probably are already seeing a dermatologist, at least on not a weekly basis, but on a regular basis. I grew up surfing over in New Smyrna Beach. I'm a hometown kid here pretty much. And they've had to cut a lot of stuff off of me. And so, yeah, it's always good to kind of know what's going on with your skin. Easily presentable if it happens. Going back to the CPR training, the sign-up sheets are already in the hallway there by the library, you know, down by the card room area. And I just checked, we have 19 people that have signed up, so we've got a good start on this. I asked Bill, I said, you know, is there a maximum number? And he said basically, no, there's not, you know, because I don't know how many dummies he has in total. I think he brought 5, maybe 6 to the CPR class I went to. And we doubled up or tripled up to do the CPR, and then they'd rotate who was doing the chest and the breathing and stuff like that. So it's a good start. Sign up. I highly encourage it. I don't think I have anything else.
Run, walk, bike.
Oh yes, reminder, Jeanette. Everybody, Jeanette Kelly, give her some applause, some love here. She's working hard along with Christine and a whole cast of folks working on putting, and Jerry too. Hi, Jerry. And she's they're putting together the second bike, walk, run event. Now this is a fundraiser for Neighbor to Neighbor. We have communications equipment that we want to be able to purchase. Also medical supplies. It ain't cheap and it goes bad, so we have to replenish every so often. Larry and Roberta, our medical chair, they've been working hard on getting the medical bags all stocked up, and so to continue that, occasionally we need to dip into our treasury. Speaking of treasury, do we have a report? Do we know?
961.
You heard the number. 961 is currently what we've got. So, and it's amazing how that dwindles sometimes kind of quick. Jerry, you've got your food collection for Leesburg Food Bank.
Yep, tomorrow and the next day you can donate things. There's a list on channel 16. They're looking for stuff for families for Thanksgiving, stuffing, turkey gravy,
Cranberry.
chicken broth,
Cranberry.
evaporated
Onion
milk.
for
I
what?
don't know what they're gonna do with that, but they are.
Pumpkin pie.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I've never made a pumpkin pie.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, so the list is on channel 16. They want either those items or a cash donation. And Ethel is one of the drop-off stations, and John and Fred and I are one of the drop-off stations, or there's a box at the CAM office that you can drop off any of those things. So it's just a 2-day thing. Please give something to the Leesburg Food Pantry.
Excellent. And while I've got you on the hook, can you grab a mic and let it over to her?
I thought I was pretty loud.
Hear ya.
Okay, so forward paths, forward pathways.
Yes.
Do you know how much we were able to raise for our charity for this year?
I don't really recall the exact amount, but we raised over $2,000 for them. Wow.
So, yeah, and
Excellent.
it goes a long way.
Yeah.
That's really great.
Thank you, Jerry
Yeah,
and team.
thank you to everybody.
Yeah.
Will we be doing another charity next year? Has that already been discussed or anything?
We'll have to see what the committee wants to do.
Okay. Well, I think it was a good idea. I'm glad you took the ball and ran with it. Way to go, Jerry, and all the rest of the folks that are involved with the Comfort and Care team. I believe they were the driving force. Okay, she's nodding her head in the affirmative.
Yeah, we had a great.
Okay, I'm off the mic.
Okay, we're going to have a short 2 or 3 minute video that deals with head, neck, and spine injuries, and then Roberta will come up and make a presentation. All right, thank you.
A head and neck or spine injury. And we are not EMTs, we're Good Samaritans, but there are things that we can do. So with that, I'll go ahead and say we have to understand that the head, the spine, and the neck all house the body's nervous system. Therefore, they're all connected. Now, we also we follow, if coming upon a victim, a patient, there are certain things we have to look for. And of course, the ABCs in first aid are considered here. When you see a person lying on the ground, first you have to check to see that they're conscious. They may not be, and that's a determination. Now, if they're conscious, you check for airway, breathing, circulation, and consciousness. But of course, you do that whether they're conscious or unconscious. But now, head injuries, we'll go with that first. The symptoms of a head injury is a patient cannot, you ask a patient questions they cannot answer correctly, simple questions, like, what is your mother's name? Do you know what day it is today? If they can't answer that, then they're disoriented or confused. You also have to check for clear or bloody fluids leaking from the body. Drowsiness, slurred speech, changes in hearing and taste or smell. Now, this is all if the patient is conscious. Intermittent or complete loss of consciousness. Well, in that instance, you can't ask them the questions. Then you have to go to unconscious, just like the video showed. You check the neck, but don't move it. Don't move the head or neck. Okay, because it's all connected to the central nervous system. You could do more damage. If the person's unconscious, they cannot tell you what's wrong with them. So then you check the body. You check the airway, of course. You check for breathing. You check for bleeding. There's no bleeding. The airway's open. They're breathing. Then you go to the body. You start to feel the body and see if there's anything broken, dislocated. You can do that. Okay? Then you have to check, if you're checking for dizziness or vomiting in a conscious person. Now, this dizziness or vomiting can be indicative of a concussion. Now, there's a difference between a concussion and a compression. Okay? The concussion is the person could present as cold and clammy and confused. They're not unconscious. They have no memory. They could have some bruising. You can use an ice pack wrapped in a cloth if they have bruising to put on a bruise, but make sure that that ice pack is wrapped in a cloth, because otherwise you could cause what they call cold burn, and it's really the same effect on the skin as a hot burn. And it can be just as nasty. Okay, a compression is the difference of something inside the head that is resting on the brain tissue. It could be a blood clot if the person suffered a fall injury. Could be a blood clot, could be a bone fragment. You don't know that, you don't see it. In that case, the person will present with a severe headache, and they'll also have red and dry skin rather than cold and clammy. And the only thing you can do for them is treat for shock. Don't move them.
How do you treat for shock?
How do you
Treat for shock.
check for shock? Well, they'll be cold or clammy.
How do you treat?
That I'll go into in another, we're doing a section on shock. I didn't go into that here,
Okay.
okay? With a shock patient, though, you will keep the head above the body if you can. If you can keep the neck stable, the head and neck stable. Also, you will cover them. Keep them warm, okay? Now, the treatment is to stabilize the head and the neck to prevent movement, obviously. We have a couple of cervical collars that we ordered that our medical people will get the training on how to handle that if they need them. You look for bleeding. If there's bleeding, you can apply a clean cloth over the wound. Don't press on it. Just apply a cloth and leave it there to absorb the blood. If you find that the bleeding's intensive, you add more gauze or whatever. But don't put pressure on it because you don't know in the head what's going on in the brain. Okay? The first thing you do is call 911. That I should have said right away. Okay? If the person's unconscious, you should treat that as a spinal injury. Okay? Which creates a whole lot of other problems. But there are certain things you don't do in any kind of a head wound, and that's don't wash the head wound that is bleeding heavily or is deep. Don't remove anything from the head if it's a puncture wound. Shake the patient. Do not shake the patient or move the patient. You just don't move them in a head injury. And do not remove a helmet if the person is wearing a motorcycle helmet, bicycle helmet. Leave the helmet on. Okay? Any questions about the head? Now, we were talking mostly about the head, whether it's conscious or unconscious. Oh, okay. You have a sheet of paper there that's going to explain a lot of this. Spinal injury, symptoms of a spinal injury.
Actually, we don't.
I'm sorry?
We don't have a sheet that talks about that.
There's nothing on there that, oh, okay.
No, in our ops manual, there will be the Samaritan's Guide to First Aid that may have a section on that.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
No, but I looked it up. All right, spinal injury, the patient will have difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, a numbness or tingling in the fingers, toes, hands, or feet or legs. If they're conscious, they may not be able to move their extremities because the spine's got all these nerves coming out. And they could have complete paralysis of the extremities, or they could be unconscious. To treat it, you call 911. You keep the patient still if they're conscious. You stabilize the neck and the torso if you can. If you have to roll them over, you put sheets, you can roll sheets or blankets along their legs, and it's better to have two people. This is only in a case if the patient shows vomiting, that they're going to vomit. You've got to get them over on their side so that they don't choke on their vomit. Then you have another issue. But then you have to roll them all at once, the whole body. You can't twist and turn that body. So that's where the blankets or a board would come in, and hopefully 2 people that you can get that person in one line, and just move them very, very gently and slowly over on the side. Don't just twist the head. The whole neck and body's got to go with it. Okay? And if there is bleeding, you treat it as a head injury. Neck injury, neck pain can be either severe or not. Numbness or tingling in the arms are some of the symptoms. Also an uncontrolled bladder. Apparently some of these nerves in the neck they go down to the bladder and they control your bladder. So you can have incontinence. Idea is call 911 and stabilize the head and neck. And the whole trick is get that neck and head stabilized. In all the cases, spinal, neck, head. If there's bleeding, you treat the head or wherever as bleeding, but don't apply pressure. Just, if you suspect a head, neck, or spine injury, and there's bleeding in that area, do not apply pressure because then you could be moving the head, neck, or spine. You put packing on top of it, and of course you call 911. If it's an artery that's spurting, well now you got a different situation. And hopefully you're not in that kind of a situation because we're not really trained. You need an EMT or a paramedic to come in and do that. Okay? Any questions? Yes?
Will you eventually be doing an idea to show how to stabilize and move the patient all in one?
Larry and I are kind of working on that. We'd like to have a group of the medical people and show them how to stabilize and have somebody come in and an EMT or even yourself, Carl, if you'd like to come in and show us as a small group how to do this. Okay, there we go, Larry. We're all set. Carl will do it.
All right.
So we'll set up that meeting. It could be another time other than a Tuesday night, and we'll get us trained in that. Maybe at the same time you could teach us how to use a cervical collar.
Yes, we could do that, but that goes a little beyond just normal first aid.
Right.
Because there's a procedure to putting that on, and you have to watch out for airway in putting that on, and especially putting it on when you're holding stabilization.
Right, correct.
It's a whole other technique.
Well, we'll look into that and research that separately.
Yes.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Yes.
One question.
Here,
I came upon an accident.
can you use this,
once.
please?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
This goes back many years, but we were in a motor home, and this guy on a motorbike with his kid on the back goes tearing past us. Next thing we know, he's all on the ground. And I jumped out, and all the neighbors came out, and I'm screaming, "Don't move him! Don't touch him!"
You did right.
Yeah, but they did anyway.
That's-
How do you make them listen to you?
With a big stick.
Well, I've got the story of my son when he was a kid and he was this is before he became a national paramedic, and he was up at the lake and found some kid off a motorcycle wrapped around a pole at the lake. And at any rate, a whole bunch of people Glenn got out, saw him, a whole bunch of people came, and he did have first aid. He was only 16. He did have first aid treatment classes, and people were coming and they wanted to move him. And he turned around and this lady said to him, she says, "You get out of the way, you're just a kid." And my son turned around and says, "You get out of the way or I'll break your arm. You're not moving him." Saved the kid's life. He ended up being a paraplegic, but it would have killed him. They would have killed him right then and there had he not. So don't move them unless you're in a situation where there's a fire, a flood, your life is in jeopardy, the patient's life's in jeopardy, then you got to get them out of there and hope for the best. Okay? Thank you.
All right. Again, we're going to be talking about things that may hurt you. As of this year, has anybody been stung by a wasp or bee this year?
Thankfully, no.
All right. My experience was coming from Speedway in a car and realized a wasp was in my car after the third time he stung me. So, believe me, I got off the road and I opened the doors and he got out, but boy, I'm still sore at this point. So things can be pretty bad. Anybody ever had a fire ant? Stepped on a fire ant?
Oh, yeah, unfortunately.
And of course, mosquitoes, what can you say?
They're spraying tonight.
Okay, I can figure this out. Just press the center button.
No, it's a two-side button. Two side buttons.
I think you have to point at your computer, though.
At that computer. All right. So what did you do? Hit the... Okay. Biting bidgies is also referred to as sandflies. They're very annoying, but they will bite you. Some people look at them almost like a miniature mosquito, and they can cause a small red whelp on your arm. And a lot of times they'll swarm. Have you ever run across little sandflies before around here?
No Sam's.
Had a lot of them in Texas, especially over West Texas. But anyway, maybe not be a problem here, but just be mindful of the sandflies. Okay. Again, a lot of us are very familiar with red fire ants. I have seen mounds around here. They were showing pictures after the storm of a colony, a colony of floating in the water. They were crawling over each other, going down the water. So they're very aggressive, and they can be very painful. I had my son, when he was a little kid back in Texas, had fallen down on a hill and then rolled right into a bed of them. So we were out there, and of course we rushed him to the ER also. But I mean, they will swarm. They'll be all over you in just a matter of seconds.
What's the treatment?
Treatment?
Yeah, what do? You step on a fire ant, what's the first thing you do?
A lot of that's
My experience, many years in Florida, Vicks vapor rub stops the sting, because you're in the garage.
okay. He mentioned Vicks.
Instead of a day, instead of lasting a week, they last about a day.
Okay, Vicks Vapor Rub. I've learned something. Keep that in mind. There's going to be other topical treatments. If you're allergic to them, you need to get the urgent care. Some people are very allergic to those type of bites. Mosquitoes can transmit diseases. Be mindful of that. Female mosquitoes do the biting. I don't know why. So just if you want to get a friendly mosquito, just find a male mosquito. But they can cause a reaction to it, and tiny puff bumps can come up and gradually swell and harden, and it can be very itchy. So I think we've all experienced that. Next is carpenter ants.
Bed bugs.
Oh, I went back?
Mosquitoes?
Oh, no. Okay, here we go. All right, bed bugs are
Except you're on
really,
mosquitoes.
Don't watch the TV, because there's a 4-second delay.
Forward.
One more.
For those that are watching us on Channel 17, we will try to get microphones to people when they ask questions, just going forward.
okay, bed bugs. All right, my son-in-law works for Marriott, and on occasions they get bed bugs, and they'll shut down a whole floor and bring in treatment. I think there's been a couple of cases even in this community where houses were basically quarantined to go treat the things. Has anybody ever experienced bed bugs at all?
Had it here in the library.
In the library? Oh, yeah, that's right. We had a situation last year in the library. So they're hard to get rid of, and it has to go through some very special treatment. So just be mindful. They can be very expensive to remove if you're in a home situation. Okay. Carpenter ants. Okay, now we're back. Carpenter ants get their name from the fondness of making nests in rotten wood, and they can sting and will bite, and so just be mindful. They're going to probably be around wooded areas and so forth, and they kind of have a formic acid that injects into the skin and can cause irritation. Okay, bees and wasps, like I said, if you, my experience is, of course, in a car, they will sting more than once. But, and then some of them can be like African bees. I've heard of situations where they will encounter people and they swarm and they will chase you, and they are very vicious. I'm not so sure, has anybody experienced any African bees in this state you know of? Yeah, they were pretty bad back in Texas, so anyway. They can, multiple stings, and they can swarm, and they can also cause death. So be very wary of that. Okay, ticks, there are several variety of ticks. The three most common you'll have in this state are the Lone Star tick. They're the most common human biting ticks in Florida. I learned something about that, and can transmit certain type of diseases. The American dog tick can cause Rocky Mountain fever and dangerous to dogs and children. And then the black leg tick is also known as deer tick, and they're carriers of Lyme disease. And just be very mindful of ticks, especially removing them from your person or another person's body. I've heard different things, using nail polish to cover them up, matchstick, and so forth. But you have to be very careful when you're removing that to make sure the head doesn't stay in. Okay, chiggers. They're kind of a mite commonly found in low damp areas. We used to get them a lot back in Arkansas when I was living there, and they would get all over and itch forever, it seemed like. So they'll attach to humans with their skin piercing mouth parts, and but they don't feed on the blood. That was kind of an interesting thing. Instead, they inject a fluid in the skin that dissolves the tissue, which they feed on once it's liquefied. So.
Wonderful.
Necromancers.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, yellow flies are more of a nuisance. originally Florida is to describe a highly aggressive species of yellow body biting horseflies. You may have heard of those. As for the mosquitoes, the females that do the biting. Sorry, guys. I mean, you know, if you're, but anyway, just be mindful of that. And they probably, especially around agricultural areas, you see a lot of them in those situations. So.
Oh, you went 2.
Spiders. I don't like spiders personally, but there are 3 that are kind of dangerous. Wolf spiders are large and ferocious looking and tend to shy away from human beings. The black widow, these spiders are mostly timid, and of course you can recognize them by the little red hourglass on top of their bodies. It can cause stings and very toxic. It can become muscle cramps and sweating. Recluse spiders are not native to this state. However, there were plenty of them in Texas where we lived, and had to be very careful, especially around wood piles and places that they usually congregate to dark places. They have a very venomous bite, and they can put you in a hospital. I've seen situations where almost like the skin begins to deteriorate all around the wound and so forth. So you definitely need to get to a hospital or an urgent care center to deal with the treatment of those bites. Okay, now to the, okay, there are about 5 varieties of poisonous snakes in this area. Eastern diamondback is the largest and most dangerous and feared venomous snake in Florida. Rattlers have a series of brown diamonds with yellow borders down its back because of its size and vivid color. And again, a lot of the venomous snakes have the pointed head, and some will warn you. When we get to water moccasins, it's a different story.
There you go.
Okay, pygmy rattlesnake. It's a little guy, but can be a very painful bite. Usually not life-threatening, but they can still require medical treatment. The pygmy is a grayish snake with a series of dark blotches on it, and averages 12 to 24 inches long.
It jumped 2. One more, go back. There you go.
Timber rattler. They're not common in Florida, but they do exist. Their range is mostly in northeast Florida. The brown band patterns on its back has a reddish tint. Now, cottonmouth or water moccasin, they don't make a lot of noise, and they can be very mean. I know one time I was in Arkansas fishing with my uncle from Monticello, Arkansas, and we were out in a john boat fishing, and all of a sudden you could see the snake is heading to the boat. Well, I figured, you know, it's going to go under, right? No, that sucker jumped almost in the boat. And you get 2 frightened people with paddles from beating that snake and getting it out of there. So they can be very aggressive. I used to hunt in areas in southern Arkansas, and I had to be very mindful of water moccasins. I had crossed a large creek one time on a tree that had fallen over, got halfway across, and there was a coiled up water moccasin in front of me. So I just layered a 2-barrel shotgun, pulled both triggers, and took care of that. But they can be very aggressive. There was one case in Lake Worth that back in Texas that a den of these things, and you'll see them in the water, and it's just like a boiling, rolling, what is a bed of snakes. And there was a skier that fell in one, and it didn't take long. He was deceased very quickly. So they're very aggressive and mean. Just be mindful. Now you see 2 different colors there. When they get older, they turn more of a dark color, black, but you can see the patterns they have when they're younger. Okay, this is common to this area. Has anybody seen a coral snake here in this community?
Oh, not here in the community.
Yes, last week.
Last week?
Yeah. 2 of them.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
They're beautiful color, and it's hard for them to bite, but just be mindful of it. It's also confused with other, like a scarlet king snake in Florida. But if you'll see at the patterns, red touches yellow can kill a felon. Red touches black, friend of Jack. So just be mindful of the patterns of it. I would personally, if I saw a scarlet king snake, as far as I'm concerned, it's a coral snake. You know, just to be safe on that one. So they're not very big, but again, they're a small mouth, so they really have to get in between something to really chew. There's very few cases of that in Florida. Okay, copperhead. Has anybody ever seen any copperheads in Florida? Okay. I know I was hunting one time with my dad and stepped over a log, and he called me back and said, "This is what you missed." And he shot it. It was a copperhead. So anyway, they're can be very painful, usually not life-threatening, but reddish-brown hourglass shape on their backs, and they can go up to 3 feet long. Okay, now, that's all the bad stuff. There are some beneficial snakes, and I'll just go this real quickly. Black racers, southern black racer is very common. I think the eastern rat snake. I have seen corn snake, very beautiful looking snake. But these do take care of rodents and a lot of bad, you know, mice and stuff like that. So I do have one neighbor on my street. The only good snake's a dead snake, in his opinion. And he's from Iowa. I don't know why he got a phobia against snakes, but you know, you could probably show a plastic snake to him, he'd probably shoot you. So. Okay, now some of these will look a little vicious, I guess. Banded water snake. Some of the patterns are very similar, and if you even look at the brown water snake, it's almost a diamond. I mean, a type of head that looks almost.
Yeah,
poisonous.
it does. It's got that,
So,
it's got that head.
So anyway, just be mindful of the rough green snake. You may have seen some of those in this community, and so forth. And lastly, the garter snakes. There's the scarlet king snake. Again, it does look very similar, but you see where the yellow is not touching the red. And they're smaller bands, and they're usually a smaller looking snake. Okay? All right, any questions? That's into that presentation.
You want me to do first aid on it?
You can talk a little bit about first aid. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, while we're on snakes, we'll talk about if you're bitten. Number one, a venomous snake, you can tell a venomous snake bite. When it bites, it leaves 2 fang marks in the skin. Where a non-venomous snake, if it bites you, will leave a row of teeth. Just like in your mouth, a little half moon of teeth. Then it's not venomous, or not supposed to be. At least that's what the book said. When a snake bites you, you'll have redness, swelling, bruising, bleeding, or blistering, severe pain and tenderness at the site of the bite. And if it's venomous, of course, you could have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. You could go into labored breathing, rapid heart rate, disturbed blood vision, metallic mint taste in your mouth. You could have increased sweating, numbness, or tingling around the face and or limbs. Also, muscle twitching are all indicative of a poisonous snake bite. First thing is, if you can call 911, call 911. Then you can apply a pressure bandage over the bite. Splint around the bite if possible. The main objective here is that you want to prevent as much of the venom as possible of getting further into the body, into the bloodstream. So therefore, you want to keep the patient calm, you want to keep the body part immovable. so that the venom isn't rapidly spreading. Okay, all right. Don't try to incise or suck out the poison. If you've got cavities or a lesion in your mouth, guess what? You're going to get it. Don't use a tourniquet if it's on a limb, because the tourniquet will keep the venom in the one area and actually cause more tissue damage and possibly even some bone damage if you put a tourniquet on. So don't use a tourniquet. You watch for shock and chills and treat accordingly. If the patient stops breathing, pulmonary resuscitation may be necessary. Okay? In rare extreme cases, cardiac arrest may occur. CPR may be required. A snake venom will cause internal bleeding. Try to identify or take a picture of the snake for the ER or the doctors. Another thing to remember is the size of the person will affect the way the person is reacting to the snake bite. Okay? Any questions on snake bites? All right. Tick bites. We know that tick bites, deer tick can transmit Lyme disease. And Larry went over Lone Star. They're mostly, Lone Star tick is most common. It has a single white spot on its back. It's medium-sized and very brown, and it's most common human biting tick. It's carrying the bacteria DM rickettsia, which is a part in the class of Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So you could get that from a tick bite. The nymphs are small, that's the baby ones, and harder to find. The object of a tick is when you see it, get rid of it as soon as you possibly can, so it isn't going deeper into your skin and it's going to be harder to get out. You got to get the whole head. You can use tweezers, but you've got to get right down close to the skin and make sure that you pull that whole head out. And yes, it's the female tick that bites. Why? She needs the blood to feed her eggs. Deer tick, you can get Lyme disease. Now, Lyme disease fevers can start up to 30 days, and in the early stages, it's difficult to point out the cause. You could be sick, but you don't know. If you've been bitten and you suspect Lyme disease, you see a doctor right away. You could have a low-grade fever. You could have a skin rash. But if you suspect that you were bitten by a tick and you feel this even up to 30 days, see your physician. The key is to remove the tick as soon as possible. Pull upward with steady, even pressure. Okay. Prevention. Stay out of heavily infected areas of ticks and Lyme disease. Now, ticks don't fly. Ticks don't really jump. They fall from up high, from leaf to leaf, limb to limb, or whatever, and could fall on you. So if you're in the woods, they fall on you, and then they'll get you. I used to work for the Department of Transportation in New York, and the guys on the road always came into the office, and I'd have to check them discreetly for ticks and pull ticks out of them. When they were mowing or working on the road, they came in with ticks all the time. The one thing about mosquitoes in Florida, there's a new mosquito around that's transmitting a disease. It's new in the Western Hemisphere since 2022, and it's called a chikungunya. It's considered subtropical, and it causes rash, fever, and severe arthritis.
Holy
And
cow.
it's becoming more common now because there's been brought in from, I don't know, Central America. Anyway, the symptoms last a week or longer. Treatment over-the-counter, pain relievers, and fever reducers. But it only lasts that long, generally. West Nile virus is one of the most common. These viruses are from an infected person or an animal to a new host. Symptoms: fever, headache, muscle pain, joint rash, vomiting, and diarrhea. If you or someone you know may have these symptoms and know you were bitten, contact your doctor or CDC right away. Spider bites, they are rare in Florida, in this part of Florida, the brown recluse. But I've seen people in Florida, right over in Bushnell, that were bitten and almost lost his leg. If you saw the picture of the brown spider, get familiar with that picture, because they are here. They're generally found in damp, lumber, rocks, in places where there's maybe foundations and it's damp. And get familiar with them, because if they do bite you, their venom causes deterioration of tissue. And I know this one person that I knew had to have the whole area of the calf of his leg cut out.
Oh.
Because there's no antidote for it. Surgery is the only way you're going to excise. And you could lose a limb or whatever. So brown recluse spiders are nothing to mess with. Like I say, they're rare here, but they're not here. Then the ticks, snake bites we did. Okay, I guess that's it. Anybody, any questions? This is just what to do in case you're bitten. And if she bites you, bite her back. That's what my dad always told me.
Pat?
Yep.
All right, now, I have to point this to you, correct? All right, good. Before we begin, I just want to give you a little background information. My name is Pat Summers, and I'm going to be saying some scary things about some of your favorite plants. It is... I am.
You can hear her.
Oh, all right. Sorry. So it's going to be scary things about your favorite plants. My goal is not for you to not have these plants around your house or in your house. My goal is that if you have grandchildren or you have pets around in your house, that you are aware of the toxins and poisons that can make them sick. Most of my information I got from the University of Florida, from their different websites, and I'll be using some vocabulary that I just quickly want to go over. Toxic. If a plant is considered toxic, it means that it contains a substance that could be harmful to animals if it's ingested. Toxicity is the amount of poisoning, the strength of it. And if something is poisonous, it means, and it's ingested, it means it can be harmful or fatal, damaging something in your body, like maybe damaging your kidneys or your heart. There are many different contributing factors. First is the amount of the dose. Actually, that is the key thing. Also, the frequency or the duration. Is this something that you're walking through every day, something that you're breathing every day? Or is this just a quick walk-through? The type of exposure is really important because it depends on how we took it in. It's either ingested, injected, inhaled, or rubbed on the skin. So, also the time of the year for the plant. Some plants have berries that are green, but they turn red in the wintertime, and in the wintertime, when they're red, they're highly toxic. Different animal species. For example, avocado is very safe for people. However, it's toxic to birds, rodents, rabbits, goats, cattle, and horses. Who knew? If you find your dog or a grandchild has gotten into a plant, it's very important. It's very important that when you call either poison control or the vet, that you tell the people what it is that they ingested, how much they ingested, and the weight of the dog or the person ingesting it. It is recommended that you really don't treat yourself, treat on your own, except poison ivy, because there are so many different species of plants. Some are toxic, some are not. Also, it depends on how it was ingested and the amount. Toxic plants affect your pet's body in several ways. The most common is the upset stomach and the diarrhea. If you have an animal, it happens all the time. Okay, there is a misconception that plants are either poisonous or they're good, and that's not true. Most plants are both. In the 16th century, there was a Swiss physician that argued that all plants are poisonous. It's the size of the dose that really makes it toxic or not. And I want you to think about how going back prehistoric times, when the hunters would hunt and the people would go and gather the berries, that was the first experimenting of plants. They found out if they got real sick and had diarrhea, ooh, not edible. They also found out, oh, I feel better. So that was when they really realized that out there in the world, plants made a difference. Now, then the traditional Chinese medicine, that's been going on for centuries. And that is a lot of collected data. And it's been practiced all over the world for thousands of years. Modern medicine that we know about didn't start until the 1800s. And the first thing that they found was the compound of morphine in the opium plant. If you've ever been in the hospital with major surgery, you're real glad for that discovery. Then there was a new phase of chemistry-based drugs started around the 1980s. And that's when the pharmaceutical companies started using all these different chemicals trying to get good drug productivity. But guess what? Didn't work. The natural compounds worked better. And recently, in the last 10 years, that's what people want. If you think about even your cough syrups, they want the elderberry and the echinacea, because it works and they feel better. They aren't taking strange chemicals. Now I found this interesting. Between 1940 and 2002, approximately 50% of anti-cancer drugs were derived from natural products. Hypertensiveness, the 64% have their origins in natural products. So, of course, the first thing that came to my head is, why are we paying so much for pharmaceuticals if they could be using what's out there naturally? Okay. My plants are going to be, oh, I see what happened. How many batteries are supposed to be in here? One. Okay, the cover came off.
There's an on-off switch on the side.
All right, oh. I don't even, I think it says off. Oh. Well, my presentation is broken up into different categories, starting with the house plants. Many of our house plants we don't use as house plants. We live here in Florida, and they grow perfectly fine outside or on our lanais. Are you going to? Okay. The first one is the dumb cane or the mother-in-law. I was at Lowe's today. I saw a dumb cane 2 aisles over. I went, oh, I know what that's called. But the dumb cane contains a calcium oxalate that exists in varying amounts in a lot of plants. I'm going to different plants, I'll say, oh, there's that calcium oxalate. The chemical that's in it forms a microscopic but razor sharp crystals. And so what happens is, if your dog or your cat were to eat any, it rips apart and irritates the tissues in the mouth. So pets will be irritated, it'll cause swelling around the mouth, and if swallowed, there would be vomiting and lots of pain. But, I'll always have that vision now of these sharp crystals. The next one is the snake plant, or the mother-in-law tongue. I thought these were called can't get rid of them. If whoever had them outside, you can spend your whole life pulling them out and they just keep growing back. In pets, it'll increase the blood pressure, drowsiness, dry mouth, lightheadedness, loss of appetite. What are the signs that you should look for? Nausea, vomiting, and a numbing effect on the throat and tongue. Now, remember, with your pets, take your phone out, take a picture of the plant, take a picture of your pet. It's very easy to email those to either Poison Control or your vet's office. That's when you do that, they will then be able to advise you what to do. Should you hurry up and pack up your dog and bring them in? Or is it something that they'll tell you, okay, force liquids? So the next one is the pothos and the philodendron. Pothos is a very common plant. I've seen it here in Legacy, even growing outside. And I was surprised. But guess what it has? The calcium oxalate. And these crystals are small glass beads that may physically pierce and cause skin irritations of the mouth and the digestive tract if chewed or swallowed. It will cause an immediate burning sensation. The sap from the pothos can also cause a rash on the skin and an irritation of eyes. If you suspect that your pet ate any of this, call your vet immediately. Here's something that I had to get used to. I'm always around plants. Wear gardening gloves. Okay, when you go and you deadhead and you trim, all that liquid, the sap can get on your skin and cause rashes. The philodendron, they're classifying as a household plant. I've always had them outside. But here in Florida, we can grow them outside, and it has the same poisonous aspects as the pothos with those calcium oxalates. The next one is the devil's backbone and a Japanese poinsettia. I really don't know these plants. The devil's backbone is a succulent, and it said that the Japanese poinsettia was in the same family. What is really toxic on this is that white, milky latex sap. And I do know with poinsettias, if you break off the stem, it's that white stuff that comes out. You should, if you're handling these all the time, wear protective clothing, protect your eyes and everything else. If a child were to ingest a significant amount, it's really unlikely that they would, because the purpose of the sap is to repel herbivores. So it has this really unpleasant taste, and it causes an immediate sensation of burning in your mouth, on your lips and your tongue. So a young child probably wouldn't ingest very much. The next one. This one, periwinkle, vinca, very common. I know I have a neighbor who she just loves her vinca. There are 30 varieties of periwinkle. Not all of them are poisonous. However, some of them are. And it depends on the amount of exposure and the amount that's been ingested. All parts of the plant are poisonous. The alkaloids cause cell death in your body.
Wow.
Think about that, though. That can be a good thing. If it's used as a cancer treatment. Okay, so yes, the periwinkle or the vinca, they do extract it, and it is in different cancer treatments because it does kill cells. So, next one. Elephant's ear and caladium. Once again, they're both in the same family, and they both contain the calcium oxalate, those crystals, those sharp crystals. All parts of the plants are toxic, and if it's ingested by a pet or a grandchild, and it's left untreated, it could be fatal. The reason it would become fatal is because when the leaves are eaten, your throat swells up, your airways swell up, and you could stop being able to breathe. I don't know, I've touched the bulbs so many times, take them out and put them in peat moss for the winter and then plant them again, but I have learned to wear gloves. Next one. Bulbs are not something that I grow, but I know there are homes here who people have gorgeous amaryllis. I mean, they're all blooming all the time. All parts of these plants and bulbs are highly, highly toxic. And the toxins are really concentrated in the rhizomes that are under the ground. And most of the poisoning is in humans rather than in the pets. The symptoms of the poisoning will occur 2 to 6 hours after ingestion. The iris, it is toxic for both animals and people. And it has the most serious illness and even death in animals. Next one. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. There used to be one in a neighbor's yard, but somebody new moved in and removed it. They're beautiful plants. They are beautiful. So all of these plants, the coral bean, the jatropha, it's in the leaves and the seeds and the sap. In your pets, if they're drowsy, a fever, drooling, blood in the urine, they're staggering, I hope by now you've already called the vet. I know with my cat, the least little thing, I was just never let him out of my sight. Human symptoms are the swollen lips, dry mouth, lightheaded, kidney damage, cold sweat, loss of appetite, and convulsions. Next one. The ligustrum, the croton, and the azaleas. All parts are poisonous to your pets. The toxins affect the stomach and the intestines, and the symptoms are usually nausea, weakness. Death is rare. Children can be harmed because their bodies haven't developed a way to fight off the toxins in the digestive system. So, once again, when you take those pictures and you call either poison control or the ASPCA is another good number to call, or your vet, make sure you have a picture of what was eaten and who ate it, and if you know the weight, that is really good information. Next one. Angel trumpet. I remember when I was a teenager, we would drive around looking for this because we were told it was hallucinogenic. What can I tell you? We never found it, so I can't testify if indeed it's true. But I have seen it here in Legacy, and all parts of the plant are toxic. And the ingestion of it can lead to really some serious problems. And this is one of those plants that you need to call for medical help immediately. Let's see. They are so toxic that Maitland, Florida, which is north of Orlando, has gone and removed them all in the entire city, and it's illegal to plant new ones. They are beautiful. I'm not sure about if they're hallucinogenic or not. Never got to try it out. But there are, in this plant, it's used for a lot of the medical compounds and under strict doctor supervision. The alkaloids that are in this plant cause hallucinations, muscle weakness, convulsions, paralysis, memory loss, and death. Wasn't what I was looking for when I was a teenager. So, lantana. Legacy has so much lantana. And our contractor, Yellowstone, will be removing some of it. Most parts are toxic to humans and pets. Eating some of the plant parts can cause liver failure and death in dogs, and the leaves can irritate your skin. I like the smell of the leaves, but now Nandina. I did an article in the newsletter last month or the month before about Nandina. There's some right outside the door over here. And it's what the developer, Pringle, planted in everybody's yard around the air conditioner. He planted it because it'll grow anywhere. However, it gets these red berries. And these red berries are attracted to cedar waxwings, robins, and mockingbirds. And if they consume the berries when other food isn't present, they can die, depending on how many they've consumed. If you are really attached to your Nandina, or some people call it heavenly bamboo, please just at least cut off the berries this time of the year. So, next one. Coral bean, highly toxic to animals and humans. It gets these seed pods that split open, and the seeds are what is really, really toxic. The Indians used to use a concoction of the roots for horse sickness. The seeds and the leaves were used in Mexico as a rat and fish poison. Coral bean is native to Florida. Okay? So, it had some uses. Just we don't want our dogs or our grandchildren going into it. Next one. Golden dewdrop, or it's called Duranta. It gets these blue flowers, and then it gets the golden colored seed pods, the round seed pods. Oleander. Yeah. And the natal plum. The oleander and the golden dewdrop, it's the berries. Well, the oleander is the sap. It can cause death, hemorrhaging, diarrhea, but these are traditional medical plants that they go in and they take out compounds that can be used for pharmaceuticals for humans. As far as the oleander, there's hundreds of varieties, and it's, once again, it's the sap, the milky latex sap that's really harmful. Plus, I would never put one in my yard. It gets these horrible caterpillars that just eat the whole thing. But anyway, next page. Horse chestnut, more commonly called buckeye. If you look at the seeds, that's where it's most toxic. Every part of this tree is toxic, the seeds, the leaves, the bark, and but the seeds have a sharp, bitter, and unpleasant taste that limits the amount that an animal will go and eat. Yupon holly is a Florida native, but as with all hollies, it's the berries that are toxic to people, not toxic to birds. Also, as few as 6 berries could cause a child to start vomiting. and 20 to 30 berries have been fatal in children. Soap berries are actually used for laundry cleaning and or dishwashing, shampooing, but you have to use hot water. So if you are a survivalist out in nature, this is what you could use to wash your hair and clean your dishes. Also, the crushed seeds are used as an insecticide. Okay, next page. Wait, am I looking at the wrong? Okay, good. Golden rain tree. People, I got an email from someone last week saying, what are these trees that are all along the roads that used to be yellow and now they have this reddish?
That's our fall color.
Yes. Guess what? This is the golden rain tree. Do you think it might be invasive? Are you seeing a lot of them just driving around the road? Very invasive. What happens is that it develops a long legume pod that has a high number of seeds in there that contain cytosine, which is an alkaloid that is highly toxic to humans and animals, especially when not ripe. Symptoms are vomiting, weakness, and incoordination. Loquat, another popular tree here in Legacy. The seeds are poisonous to dogs and cats. They contain a hydrocyanic acid, which is extremely toxic. Symptoms, once again, vomiting, diarrhea, panting, seizures, coma. If it's left untreated in your animals, death could occur within 24 hours. Chinese tallow. It's another tree that is invasive. People refer to it as the popcorn tree because it gets, the seed pods are like 3 bumps on it. People like them because this time of the year the leaves turn pretty colors. However, it's the seed that's toxic, and the seed is also used in soap making and candle making. Who knew? Next page. Brazilian pepper is going to be my article for the December newsletter because it's also called the Christmas berry tree. People like to use it for decorating around Christmas time because that's when the berries turn red. We have some here in Legacy. I know it came from across 48 because I used to see it over there. And it is in the same family as poison ivy, poison oak, and poison sumac. And so the sap can cause extreme skin irritation. The seeds and the leaves are highly toxic to your animals. I will tell you, you do not want one in your yard. They're very hard to get rid of because it is so compact, you can't get into it to get rid of it. China berry tree. I saw one in the Lowe's parking lot today. And actually a big branch was broken. The seeds are marble-sized and they're yellow. And once again, poisonous. The Persian silk tree or mimosa tree we have here in Legacy. And what happens is after it flowers, it develops a flat seed pod, and that contains seeds that are toxic if consumed. They contain a neurotoxin known as ginkgo toxin. that's a real danger to children and pets, and you need to seek immediate attention. Next page. Cherry laurel and black cherry, they're natives. They are some of my favorite trees. However, the seeds are toxic. Not to the birds, but to people and animals because there's cyanide in the seeds. If the leaves become wilted, that's when they're most poisonous. Once it's been ingested, there's staggering and convulsions begin within 15 to 20 minutes, and death often occurs within 1 hour. It is advisable to know how to identify cherry trees. Well, because the birds eat them and reseed, there are quite a few cherry trees on the trails here. But there is an entomologist named Doug Tallamy, who really supports trees, insects, birds, mammals, the entire food circle of life food chain. And it just so happens that the black cherry tree supports 450 species of moths and butterflies. It's considered a keystone plant, just like our oaks. Our oaks support even more. Number 1 is the oak, number 2 is the cherry, and number 3 is the willow. And so, do we need to go and cut down all the black cherry trees? Absolutely not. You know, but do you need to make sure that your grandchild doesn't go picking these little tiny cherries? I will admit, I did pick it, and I used my nails. There's not very much cherry in it. It's mostly seed. So, as much as some of these plants will harm your grandchildren or your animals, they have many more beneficial aspects to them. Next page. Here we have our palms and our cycads. And once again, it's the seeds. And, you know, they just cause drowsiness, rash, dry mouth. Now, the cycads, it's mostly from the seeds and the cardboard plant. We used to have it here at the pool, and I don't know if it's still there. It's really toxic to dogs, the seeds, when they get into there. I know I had a friend who lost a dog because of it. The kunti was used by the Native Americans. They would take the bulb and mash it up for flour. But remember, they had a different digestive system than we do, and they also cooked things differently than we do. Do not try to eat the kunti bulb. Next, poison oak, poison ivy, poison sumac. Every time I would go to the doctor, I would say, sorry, stay back, because I had poison ivy. I'm just one of these. If I walk by it, I get it. These are all related, and they all contain a chemical known as urushiol, and it triggers a severe, itchy, painful inflammation of the skin. The rash can last from a week to 3 weeks. Would your Vicks Vapo Rub help on it?
No, you need an ocean of calamine.
Oh, yeah, I've got all that stuff. But this is one of the things that you don't need to call poison control over. You can treat yourself. Next page. Morning Glory, Yellow Jasmine, and Balsam Pear. Balsam pear we have on the trails. It's really an invasive. You don't want it in your yard. It will cover everything. It's really most poisonous when that pear, that orange pear, is still green. It can cause a brain hemorrhage, a rash, or lightheadedness. The yellow jasmine people like to have in their yards, but it has neurotoxins in it, so when it's ingested, it can cause paralysis or muscle weakness, difficulty breathing and swallowing. Morning Glory. The seeds, the roots, and the sap. You know, I don't talk about adults getting hurt because hopefully we all know not to eat any of these. Next, English ivy. I know it's become very invasive in other parts of the country. I don't see it down here very much because I think it's a shade lover. We don't have much shade. But it will increase your blood pressure, cause an eye irritation, and labored breathing. Next. The coral ardisia, the rattlebox, and the milkweed. The rattlebox we have here in Legacy. It gets these little, first it has yellow flowers, and then the yellow flowers dry, and then it gets these little pods that are maybe, an inch long, thinner than a pencil, but you take it and you shake it and you can hear all the seeds, and that's why they call it rattlebox. Milkweed. If you've ever trimmed back your milkweed, all that sap, you really don't want it on your skin. You don't want it on your clothes either, it stains. And for those people who have tropical milkweed, this is the time of year that you need to cut it down to about between 4 and 6 inches to help our monarchs out because it has a virus and we don't want them eating it in the winter time. Milkweed, highly, highly toxic, contains cardiac glycosides if it's ingested, and if it's ingested in large amounts, could even cause death. Like I said, the rattlebox, it's the seeds. Next. Pokeweed. I like pokeweed. We do have it on our trails, and it starts out with a white flower, and then it gets these dark purple or black berries on it. All parts of the pokeweed are highly toxic. Well, I remember seeing a movie where they went out and got the pokeweed to cook it and eat it. And so I did a little more research, and a long time ago when people lived out and survived out in the wilderness, they did eat pokeweed, but there's a whole regiment of what you have to do to cook it. You know, you cook it for hours, change the water 3 times. So if somebody says, hey, let's pick some pokeweed to cook, don't try it. Air potato, I feel like the air potato queen because I have just complained and complained about the air potato because it's so highly invasive, but it's the tubers that are mostly invasive. But the tubers are in 2 places. They're down in the ground and they're up high attached to the vine. The only way to eradicate this plant is to dig up the tubers and remove them. I had my grandchild helping me last winter with one of those little grabber claw things, and so he would grab the tubers and pull them out. It can lower your blood pressure instead of raise it, so if you have problems with high blood pressure, maybe you want to be on a committee to go pull some of these. But, next, water hemlock and poison hemlock. I'm not positive that we've had it around our ponds. I have seen something that's already been sprayed that looks like it had the umbrella formation of the flowers. We have a company that comes to our ponds, and he's really good about spraying anything that would be toxic. However, both of these look alike and can become, people can be confused by them. They both have white flowers that grow in umbrella-like clusters, but the water hemlock has dark green leaves that have a purple or red tinge on the stem, whereas the poison hemlock has more of a dull green color. And the water hemlock's leaves are a hairy feel to them. The leaves of the poison hemlock, all parts are poisonous, but the roots, leaves, and seeds contain the highest amount of poison. They write mysteries about hemlock, how one killed another one using the poison hemlock. Now, mistletoe was put into that group, and mistletoe we have here. It grows in mostly our oak trees, and right now the word just went right out, but it attaches to the branches and to the limbs, and it goes into the wood, and it sucks all the moisture out and all the nutrients out of the trees. So in the wintertime, after the oak trees drop leaves, you'll say, what are those balls of green? That's mistletoe. You do not want to bring it down and use it for Christmas decorations. Highly toxic. Okay. Next one. Nightshade, castor bean, and rosary pea. Rosary pea, I did an article, I believe, last month on rosary pea, and I've been complaining about rosary pea for a long time. Rosary pea has abrin, which is very similar to ricin. The castor bean has ricin in it. The rosary pea has abrin. And both of these are just highly, highly, highly toxic. Castor oil comes from the castor bean. However, it has been heat treated and refined to remove any of the ricin. The rosary pea has a very hard outer shell that does not break down when birds go to eat it. It just passes right through. However, if that shell is punctured or broken in any way, the inside part can be fatal. In Africa and India, they make a paste out of the rosary pea seeds, and they use it to put on arrows to have poison arrows. But other countries use rosary pea to make jewelry. I wonder how long they live, taking a sharp needle, sticking it through the rosary pea, but it's done in very third world countries. That's what they do. Nightshade, the berries are most toxic. Another name for nightshade is belladonna. And the taste of the berries is so bad that animals rarely eat enough to cause death. Nightshade, there's a whole group of plants that are in the nightshade family. Tomatoes are in the nightshade family. You don't want to eat the leaves of your tomato plants. And once again, wear gloves if you're, I've got aphids on mine, not on my tomato, but on the squash next to it. So I was out there with a brush, trying to brush on something to kill the aphids, but I was wearing gloves. So, next, we have this here, also at Legacy, horse nettle and stinging nettle. If you've ever come across it, you would not forget it. The plant itself has these very sharp but thin spines, thorns, but they're smaller than thorns. It will cause an irritation that really should only last about 24 hours. The horse nettle, the other name is tread softly. It sounds like maybe some Native American Indians gave it that name. But they will also, it inflicts this intense pain. And for the tread softly, it usually only lasts about an hour. Tropical soda apple, we have here in Legacy. It goes on our invasive list. It is highly toxic to humans, but not cattle. So the cattle eat it, and then it spreads. And it too has thorns on it. It gets these round, green malted round fruits. But then those turn yellow. And inside there's like 1,000 seeds. And it's, so, what I said in the beginning, I really meant. I just wanted you to be aware, and believe me, there are a lot more plants that I could have put on here, but I want you to be aware of plants around your animals and around your grandchildren. I know, ooh, pretty flower, and that's what they tread softly. That's what I worry about all the time, because I just know that when my grandkids were young and they saw those pretty little white flowers, they'd be over there wanting to pick them for grandma. So please just make sure that you have in your phone Poison Control's telephone number. You also should have, if you are an animal person, have a dog, you should also have the phone number for the ASPCA. They have a 24-hour emergency hotline, and whatever you do, do not try to induce vomiting, okay? Wait until your vet tells you what to do. Try to keep your dog from grooming himself, or your cat, because there may be some of the toxin on the fur. Also, it says to collect any of the vomit or stool that your animal may excrete and take that to the vet's office so that the vet can see if it's passing through. Your vet may have you bring your animal in to receive IV fluids, to induce vomiting, or to administer activated charcoal, because apparently that absorbs poison. As far as for the humans, most likely, if you call your doctor's office or poison control, they will tell you to drink lots of fluids. If you aren't down, they will have you come in for an IV, or they may have to empty your stomach with an NG tube. But it's so important to take the picture of that plant, because they need to know what it was that was ingested, so they need to know the proper treatment. And always wash your hands after you've been around the plants, especially before you rub your eyes. So, that's it. Any questions? Any questions?
No, but I have a comment.
What?
I put a wonderful app on my phone called Picture This.
Yes.
If you haven't heard of it, go get it.
Well, and actually even Google has one.
It's
And
so
it's-
handy to have on your
And
phone.
it is, because it'll tell you what the plant is. Yes.
Okay, again, question?
Yes.
In the old first aid books, there used to be a universal antidote for humans. It was burnt toast, milk of magnesia, and one other item. I need help with that.
I just remember the little brown bottle from when my daughter was a baby. Yes.
That's not hard to carry, because they can't hear us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just remember, when you had an infant in the house, they always made sure that you had Epicatic in your medicine cabinet. Yes, yes, because I know I was carrying my daughter on my hip with an open can of paint, and I turned around to look at her, and she was covered in paint. She had put her hand in, and what do? They put everything in the mouth, which is why with small children, you really need to keep an eye out as to what they're putting in their mouths. So, and I mean, I have talked to people here in Legacy about rosary pea and the number of small grandchildren that we have, and they're really pretty berries, and they're down on the ground, the ones that have fallen. I came home one day and had one stuck in the sole of my sneaker, and I thought, ooh, a 2-year-old would just go pick, 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 and get that out. So I do know that Yellowstone is working on the removal of rosary pea.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Pat.
any other questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. If you want to see Christine about to sign up for the potluck, she'll be right there, and thank you for coming out.
Thank you, everyone.